The truth is, there is no growth without discomfort in any capacity. There's no growth without discomfort. Even when you're, in a gym, weight training, right? As soon as you pick up those weights for the first day, you're doing okay. And the next day you can't move. Every muscle is sore and you feel stiff, right? There's no growth without discomfort. But that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It means your body's doing something it's not used to doing. That's no different than how the brain operates.
That's the voice of Dr. Elsa Wagdy. Back by popular request, I am delighted to welcome back Dr. E again. Check out episode 26 for our last conversation if you missed it. Dr. Wagdy is a board-certified medically trained doctor with 2 PhDs, 3 master's degrees, and 2 decades of clinical practice. She works with the mind and body, supporting people in healing from chronic diseases and psychological conditions. And today on Living Big Mindfully, in honor of Mental Health Awareness Month, we are diving into the topic of anxiety, depression, and so much more. Depression and anxiety are some of the most common issues in the world right now. So if your loved one is struggling, A, you're not alone, and B, this episode is for you. From start to finish, you will get so many actionable tips and strategies. There is something in here that will help you. So settle in, grab a pen and paper, and get ready. We begin with how it all starts with the thinking, why our minds influence absolutely everything, and how we can begin and must learn how to train the body to feel calm again. Dr. E coaches us through a couple of techniques, and she gives us some suggestions for the supplements that we should be considering, some surprising things we should be avoiding, and some must-dos when it comes to food and movement. And as for the sage advice, this episode is packed full of it. I was laughing with Dr. E today. This conversation felt like a combined psycho-bio lecture in the very best way. I sincerely hope this conversation creates some light bulb moments and inspires you to take one step towards healing. If you are struggling, know that there is help. Reach out to Dr. E, links are in the show notes, or set up a call with me. Let's explore your options and get you headed in the right direction. And remember, I love free resources, so download your free guide, From Panic to Peace, 12 Ways to Calm, my gift to you, at katechampionauthor.com/books. So I thank you for listening today. I'm here for you. I support you. And here's Dr. E. Enjoy. All right. Hello. I am welcoming Dr. Elsa Wagdy today. I call her Dr. E, which I love, and I hear that stuck with her. This is another conversation. I'm so excited to connect with you today. Thank you so much.
Happy to be here. It's always a pleasure. I absolutely love being a part of your journey.
Thank you. We had just such a great conversation in our pre-chat. We're really talking about kind of loss and death and how the culture looks at it. And today is all about kind of mental health and mental health awareness. And I would love to hear just a little bit about more about your journey and background, if you're willing to share. That would be awesome. Of
course. Absolutely. Mine has been an interesting journey for sure. There is not much in my life that I have not experienced, whether positive or negative in that fact. I've dealt with a great deal of, physiological diseases, including cancers and tumors and seizures and heart attacks and all kinds of endocrine issues. I've also dealt with a lot of mental health when I was quite young, especially in my teens and early 20s, anxiety, depression, bipolar. At one point they thought there was something else. I can't remember. I think like sociopathic issues, and they realized that was a wrong diagnosis. But through all of these issues, they kept doing is prescribing more and more drugs. Right.
Hey,
rather
again,
than trying to figure out why a teenager who is already going through some serious hormonal issues,
also not a substitute for mental,
part of
physical,
life, and
or any
the brain's
other
not fully formed. Why
healthcare-related
would you
treatments.
give them drugs and not figure out why are they acting
and
out that way?
concerns, please contact
Right. People don't
your
behave
licensed healthcare
in
professional.
any manner without a reason behind it. They may not be conscious of the reason, but there's definitely one in your subconscious leading you to be who you are. And after, getting cancer for the third time in my late 20s, I decided that, enough's enough. These drugs and chemo and everything else were just going to kill me. I didn't have a chance, they said, anyway. They thought I was going to die within 6 months to a year. And so what I ended up doing is deciding that I'm going to find a different path. Because if I'm going to die anyway, I may as well find something that's going to be a little bit less destructive to me and those around me. And I ended up actually journeying and working with great, monks, learning Zen and becoming a Zen master, but that took a good 10 years. And through that process, I found myself. My real self. I found all the traumas from my childhood, dealing, with parental issues, with cultural issues, identity issues. I found who I truly am, which had nothing to do with people around me or even, the environment around me. I found my power, which is simply my ability to witness what's going on and let go. To assign my own meaning to what's happening and change the script I was telling myself. That, I was damaged, I'm not worthy, nobody's going to love me. If my own parents don't love me, how can anybody else love me? And you don't realize you're actually saying that in the moment, right? You don't notice that these are the actual words, but in a roundabout way, that's actually what you're saying. And therefore your actions are usually in alignment to that. You're attracting situations and people that'll make you feel what you already feel, which is less about yourself. And as such, I started disconnecting from people, not with anger or resentment. In fact, I had, my parents and I had disowned each other when I was a teenager. So I hadn't talked to them for many, many years. And all of a sudden, I found peace and acceptance and forgiveness, unconditional love. And I talked to them. I said, we need to reconnect. And I forgave them for everything. And we all had a good cry and realized that, there were mistakes made, but we're human. And we have to let go. Because the only person you're really hurting at the end of the day is you. If you hold on to anger, if you hold on to pain, sorrow, resentment, envy, jealousy, all of these negative emotions, the only person you're actually hurting is you. You're not really hurting the other person as much as you're hurting yourself. And why give somebody else that kind of power over you to start with? Because it makes you extremely easy to manipulate if you care about what other people think, including your own family. If you're doing things that are not hurting you or others, and it's coming from a place of positivity, not greed, you're coming from a place of peace and positivity, then let things go. It doesn't matter what other people think. Continue down your path, and you suddenly find people who are in alignment with who you currently are.
That's so true.
And that's the thing about life too, is true maturity, true wisdom comes from outgrowing who you used to be. You literally have to become a different person, completely to your core. You become a new personality with a new identity. And most people cannot do that because they're trying to be a new person, but they're holding on to who they used to be, who they are, And so if you can't let go, you can't transition over, how can you possibly become something new, holding on to the past, holding on to who you were? Who you were made you that ball of stress, that sick person. If you want to be someone different, you need to do different things. You need to become an entirely new person. And sometimes that's not possible in your current circle, which is why we often let go of people as we're transitioning, as we're becoming somebody else. Because they don't understand it, right? They're used to you being a certain way, which is what the qualities they were looking at that kept you close. So if these qualities have now changed, of course, there's going to be this divergence in your path. And that's okay. And I realized the more I let go and simply accepted people for where they are with gratitude, with peace, with love, I wasn't judging them. I wasn't saying, oh, I'm better than you because I'm not angry anymore. Or, it's like, no, I get why you're angry. I get the pain. I understand it. I viscerally can feel what you went through. But why do I want to continue feeling that way? I'd rather live in peace and forgive and let go. Forgiveness doesn't mean I'm going to invite certain people back in my life if they haven't changed as well. But you can forgive and move on. Don't carry the baggage with you. Just put it down and step away. That's all it is. And then, I've been in medicine well over 20 years, and I have a couple PhDs and like 3 master's degrees, and they're all in different avenues targeting, both mind and body, because the one thing I noticed is that the mind does control the body much more so than the other way around.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I also got a PhD in quantum physics and quantum mechanics because I realized that a great deal of what we believe about reality and existence is actually a complete fabrication. It's a myth. Because it's not actually built on the science of quantum physics. And there are laws in quantum physics. They're not just theories. There are actual laws. We know them as facts. But they're not applied to the fields of medicine or the fields of, neuroscience or psychology, despite the fact that they affect and control those very much so.
Yeah.
So my work has been, a great deal in diving into consciousness, the mind, how it interacts at the quantum level, and how it affects physical structures, including the body and your reality.
Yeah. Let's start there. Yeah. Maybe we could start. Let's start with, because I am 100% aligned that it does start with the mind and the thinking, right? The thinking.
Absolutely.
And how we, what did you say? How we make meaning of things, right? In that external environment. So because I'm sure there are listeners out there like, what? How do you do this? And I've been trying to do this forever. I hear in my practice, I hear that a lot. How do you just let go? How do you just let go? And that's a tough question to answer, frankly. It's like, well, I don't know. So help.
I know.
Help
You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. It's not, oftentimes saying to just let go is so much easier than the actual practice of doing it. And I will admit, it takes time. It takes dedication. And initially in that process, you will not like it. You will be uncomfortable. I have to be honest, because you are now uncovering issues about yourself, your beliefs about yourself, about the world around you, that either you've suppressed or repressed, and now you're needing to face it. And that forceful facing can be exceptionally uncomfortable to people, especially because we develop coping mechanisms to not face these uncomfortable feelings.
Not feel, right? The feel the feelings.
You don't want to feel it, and you don't want to think it. You don't even want to face it. And so now you have to. The truth is, there is no growth without discomfort in any capacity. There's no growth without discomfort. Even when you're, in a gym, weight training, right? As soon as you pick up those weights for the first day, you're doing okay. And the next day you can't move. Every muscle is sore and you feel stiff, right? There's no growth without discomfort. But that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It means your body's doing something it's not used to doing. That's no different than how the brain operates. It has neural pathways built in because of something you've been doing for so long. That repetitive habituation creates neural pathways. And when you're doing something different from that pathway, you're breaking that neural path in the brain. Therefore, it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So it's a physiological effect as well. And that's okay. Right. So go in understanding I'm going to be uncomfortable for the first little while, but it's very transient. It's an acute phase. You're not going to be there very long as you're dedicated to just being uncomfortable. Go in knowing I'm going to be uncomfortable and I'm going to be okay. That's it.
I love that. Yeah. So let me say that again. Yeah, let's repeat that. I'm going to be uncomfortable and I'm going to be okay, right?
Yes,
It's a yes
it's a
and.
must. Because
Mm-hmm.
the problem I see is a lot of people say, "Oh, I hope things are going to be okay. I hope this is good." Hope is not a bad thing, but the problem is most people use hope as a cover for negativity. It's coming from a place of negativity. It's coming from a place of fear, insecurity, a lack of confidence, and mostly in yourself. So in that sense, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you're coming in already doubting yourself, you're going to fail. It really is that simple.
Mm-hmm.
You need to come from a place of knowing, I know I can do this. I
know I'm going to be okay.
Yeah, I know I'm going to be okay. I am fine. I can do this. And when you know that it's going to be uncomfortable and you accept that, you are going to be okay. The issue lies is if you don't accept the fact that you're going to be uncomfortable, you're trying to move around it somehow.
Yeah.
A lot of people do. That's what coping mechanisms are. That's what addictions are. Is I don't want to feel these bad feelings. I don't want to think this. I don't want to, I just can't live in thinking and feeling in this particular way. So I'm going to try to do something else to distract me from that. That's what addictions are. Whether it's smoking, whether it's cocaine, heroin, even pharmaceutical drugs, right? Benzos, especially tranquilizers, I must say. Those are extremely addicting. And all they're doing is really masking the symptoms. And they make things much worse long term because you haven't addressed things, and they're extremely, extremely addicting in themselves. Plus, you're trying to change your brain without addressing the issues that caused the change in your brain.
That's right. That's right. Yes. Yeah. It's like being on the water without any oars, right? And expecting to get somewhere. Yes.
I'm not opposed to some medications for certain things to get you across the gap of change. But absolutely not as a solution.
Yeah,
and it's always a last resort. It's really not meant for most people. You know, bipolarism, depending if it's one or two, schizophrenia, things like that. Yes, they might require a little bit of pharmaceutical intervention because the brain is doing something it's not supposed to do. But here's the thing, and this is really important for people to understand. Mental health issues start in the mind, not the body. So they don't start in your brain. It's not a neurotransmitter issue. That was a myth from the 50s and 60s. It got disproved in the 90s. And we know it's not that. It's the internal dialogue you're having. You know, what you're telling yourself, what you believe is directing what you think. And that's going to eventually, like I said, create a neural circuit in your brain so that you act in accordance to what you believe and think. And
let me just ask you a question.
Yes.
Yeah, let me just ask you a question. So when I meet with somebody with, severe anxiety, or they have, really chronic kind of treatment resistant depression in kind of air quotes, you're saying it's generally not a dopamine or a serotonin concern. It's started in the thinking and the beliefs. Is that what I'm hearing?
Absolutely. Okay. And here's why, and I wrote a paper on this, and here's why we know this is true. Things that are in fact physiological, things that are in fact genetic. This is the key word, something genetic. Something genetic means you actually are born with it. So things like sickle cell anemia, these are things you're born as a fetus, even you have these issues. No young children, especially infants and toddlers, come about with anxiety and depression. None of them do. And this is across all cultures. They're actually most peaceful, joyful, happy, humans around. It's the environment you're in is very much going to dictate a lot of what you end up believing. So if you were in an abusive family, an abusive environment, whether it's your immediate family or school systems putting you down all the time, which happens to a lot of kids, you're going to end up developing a brain that's not functioning the way it was intended to. Okay, so it's not that you were born that way, but your environment has conditioned you into that, which created neural pathways that are now maladjusted. So we still need to deal. Yes, we need to deal with, how do I change these neural pathways? And drugs don't change neural pathways. They will change neurotransmitters, whether it's reuptaking or placing more. It doesn't actually change the pathway itself, because the pathway is habituation. What are you always doing? What are you always saying? What do you always believe?
What are you always thinking? Right?
Yes.
What are you always thinking? Yeah.
Yes, that's exactly it. And so that part is exceptionally important, to actually understand what's happening and change your brain. And the thing about serotonin and dopamine, when it comes to anxiety, they play a very small role. Okay, that is more resistant depression will fall with more dopamine and serotonin issues. But anxiety has very little to do with either. Okay, so
tell us more about that. Tell me more. Tell me why. Tell me more.
Anxiety is usually, a hyperactivation of acetylcholine. And that neurotransmitter is very excitatory. It is a very excitatory, which is why when you look at the synaptic connections, every time it's there, it's very fast. And it actually, when you have too much of it, you end up with seizures. So that's the other thing. Seizures are a hyperactivation of your synaptic connections. And they in themselves, you can think of seizures as an extreme form of anxiety from a biological perspective.
Wow.
So what that means, if you have too much ACH, you definitely also, we know that when it comes to anxiety, it's a low GABA that you have. You don't have enough GABA, whether it's the neurotransmitter itself or whether they're not attaching to receptors. Regardless, it's low GABA and high ACH. You're in trouble. You have anxiety.
So what to do? What do you do? So you've got low GABA and you've got high whatever else you said. What now?
Some of the most basic things we should do is, one, again, understand your beliefs. You really need to understand. But to get to your beliefs, it's a backward approach. So we reverse engineering. What behaviors do you have? Anxiety is very much mental, it's negative self-talk, negative beliefs, not being in the present, hyper-focused on the future, trying to control events that are, well into the future. And then you end up with, sleep disruptions, which will absolutely cause chaos. But there's also a physical component to anxiety that people often miss because they're not living in their bodies when they're so hyper involved in their mind. The physical symptoms very much can resemble a heart attack, because there are different forms of anxiety. PTSD is an extreme form of anxiety. That's what it is. It's post-traumatic stress disorder. And that's an extreme form. Phobias are anxieties, right? Different phobias, those are anxieties. OCD is also a form of anxiety. The compulsive part of it, or the obsessive part of it, that's a thought anxiety disorder, right? And then you have social anxieties, and you have panic disorders. That's severe as well. Panic disorders they do mimic a heart attack. We see people in the ER all the time coming in because they think they're having a heart attack, because yes, you have palpitations, you'll have chest pain, pressure, you'll have shortness of breath. It's almost like you have asthma as well. You can feel your heart. And you end up with arrhythmia. Like if we look at your EKGs, we can see arrhythmia. So it does feel like a heart attack. It's not, but very much resembles one, right?
Absolutely.
And the other, generalized anxiety, which is what most people tend to have, is just an everyday feeling of worry, restlessness, irritability, and then you end up, you can't concentrate, you can't sleep, your body starts to ache over time for no reason. The biggest indicators is IBS. IBS is almost always anxiety. Okay. GI issues like nausea, diarrhea, just cramping. You also sweat, whether it's cold sweats or just actual hot sweating. You end up with palpitations, hot flashes. You flushed all of a sudden. These are all symptoms of physical anxiety because, again, the mind controls the body. So if something is going on in your mind, it's going to show up physically. And the reason for it is it has to let you know, hey, this is what's happening. Do you like this or not? The physical sensations, what we feel viscerally, no different than an emotion, we feel it viscerally, is to allow you to have an opportunity to feel the feeling, feel what's happening in your body, and then check in and go, okay, what am I thinking about? Do I like how I'm making myself feel? Is this what I want? If the answer is yes, by all means proceed. If the answer is no, then check in. What am I thinking about right now? In this moment, what am I thinking about?
Yeah.
You cannot change things without changing what you're thinking.
Yeah.
You have to change what you think to experience something different.
Yeah.
Right? And so there are a lot of the times I find, especially with generalized anxieties, it's really based a lot of the times in a lack of vitamins and minerals because your diet is actually quite poor. And in the Western cultures, this is hands down well known. We know anxiety and depression are very much related to the ultra processed foods, to the junk foods, more specifically, a lack of enough vegetables and fruits and fish in the diet.
Yeah.
So get that under control. Start by eliminating junk foods and ultra processed foods and simple carbohydrates, because when you have a spike in glucose, you will exhibit anxiety. You will get tremors, you'll get shakes. And despite what people think, it is a myth that the brain operates best using glucose. The brain actually operates best using ketones. That is a fact. We just recently discovered it. And the reason we know that, and it coincides with evolution, we've never in our history of humans, of humanoids even, had as much food as we do now, especially simple carbohydrates.
Yeah.
And the truth is, because we were not starving, but really, it's almost like we were in a state of fasting most of the time. We live primarily on ketones, and ketones actually allow your brain to be not hyper alert, but extremely aware of your surroundings. You become actually hyper focused. You can concentrate extremely well. You have a greater control over your mind and body when you're actually in a more ketone-based diet. But when I talk about ketones and ketosis, I don't mean doing, Atkins diets or things like that, because again, going heavy on meats, especially red meats, will cause some serious adverse effects physiologically as well, including heart attacks and strokes. You don't want too many saturated fats. You want some. They're not bad for you. You actually need them. But you don't want a lot. You need to be high on vegetables, moderate on protein, and moderate on healthy fats. Right?
Yeah.
Because and the other thing is anxiety can also be caused by diseases. So one of the things I always tell, people to check is your glucose levels, check your sugar levels, your blood sugar.
That's a great point.
If you have metabolic syndrome, diabetes, hyper or hypoglycemia, they're very much going to cause different mental health disorders, including anxiety.
Yeah.
So check your blood glucose levels. That's extremely important. The other one is check your thyroid. Your thyroid, whether you're hypo or hyper, is again going to exhibit mental health issues. So check your thyroid. And the other last one to check is check your iron levels, because that does the same thing. Your iron levels very much will lead to some serious mental health issues. So check your iron levels. Now, the other thing to be aware of is, especially for women, but also for men, as you're kind of hitting that 40 plus mark, you're becoming, premenopausal and menopausal. For men, it's called andropause, where your testosterone's changing. Check your sex hormones because they also cause mental health disorders. Anxiety and depression being the most common for both sex.
Yeah. So if somebody was going to their primary care doc, would you recommend, like, for the first time to help with depression or get some help with anxiety, would you really encourage that person to advocate for themselves for some of this blood work?
Absolutely. Hands down.
Okay.
Ask them for, a sex hormone panel, thyroid, iron, glucose, blood glucose. These are extremely important. The other ones I would add is check your B12 and your vitamin D3.
Got it.
Because again, when you lack certain minerals and lack certain vitamins, you will exhibit mental health disorders as well as physiological disorders. But people we eat not because it's a social event or it is because we like it. We eat because we need specific vitamins and minerals for cellular functions to occur in a proper way. When they don't, because they're missing these specific vitamins and minerals, at the DNA level, at the cellular level, you're going to be missing something, which means something is going to malfunction or mutate. Mm-hmm. Not only now do you end up with physical issues down the line, but you're going to exhibit mental health issues as well. And if you're trying to target serotonin, for instance, which a lot of people do, understand that over 95% of it is in your gut. It's not in your brain. Okay. This is critical to understand, because if you're trying to treat your brain for serotonin issues, yet less than 5% actually resides there, most of it is actually coming from your gut, traveling up into the brain.
Wow.
Okay, so eat properly. You might even need to take probiotics, because if you're lacking serotonin, that means your bacteria, your microbiome essentially is malfunctioning, and you need to now introduce the right balance once again.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And dopamine, more than 50% of it is also in your gut, not your brain.
Wow.
Right. But when it comes to anxiety, like I said, this is not really so much a serotonin dopamine issue as it is a norepinephrine, adrenaline, cortisol, and GABA and acetylcholine. So again, a lot of people don't understand this because there's been a lot of confusion. And unless you have a medical background, you really don't understand how these neurotransmitters, these different hormones, and the different vitamins and minerals all interact with each other and where their source actually is. Right? So diet is important, right? Definitely eat a lot of vegetables and fruits. Okay?
Got it.
Cut down on junk and processed foods, and cut down on simple carbohydrates. I'm not saying go keto, but just cut down on it. Make most of what you eat vegetables and fruits in its whole form, so that all the nutrients are there. You can also take some natural supplements like omega-3. Now, for most people in Western countries, I tell them to take an omega-3 high in DHA because they don't eat a lot of seafood and fish, and that's primarily where you're going to get it. And this is anti-inflammatory as well, but it also affects the mental health side of things for both anxiety and depression.
Yes.
So omega-3, taking a B complex is also important. I very rarely will tell people to take a specific B vitamin because they do work synergistically. And throwing one out of whack will throw the rest as well. So take a good B complex. Take a good multivitamin as well, just to make sure all the bases are covered, right?
Okay.
Magnesium glycinate, and especially glycinate, not the other ones, is also a natural calmer. It kind of calms anxiety. I usually tell people to take that one in the evening because it does have a calming effect. And you can take that one up to 600 milligrams and you'll be okay. The other one is vitamin D3. Take vitamin D3. Most people need at least 3,000 units a day. And this is especially true of people who are not outdoors for at least an hour every day in direct sunlight.
Got it.
So,
yeah.
And then other things is, you can take an adaptogen like ashwagandha. Ashwagandha is brilliant because it literally adapts to what your body is in need of. So whether you're too high or too low, it'll bring it to the right balance. And nobody, as far as we know from data, is allergic to ashwagandha. There are no allergies or no adverse reactions. So taking ashwagandha in the form of a tea is a wonderful thing. And I prefer it over what people call holy basil or tulsi because, yes, it's also an adaptogen, but it does actually interact with a lot of pharmaceutical medications, and it does have allergies and reactions to a lot of people. So I don't generally go that route without doing a full diagnostic and knowing what I'm dealing with in that person.
Got it.
Other ones that are also harmless but extremely clinically effective are lemon balm and chamomile. And you can have those both as a tea, and you can mix them. They are natural relaxants. So they calm you. And I usually tell people, steep it for at least 10 minutes, but then leave the tea bag in there. Don't take it out. And just sip on it. You can have as much as you want in a day. There are no adverse effects.
Yeah, that's
These are,
lovely.
Natural supplements, essentially, you can take. I'm also very leery of lavender. Yes, lavender does impact the brain and cause an anxiety reduction. However, lavender is also an endocrine disruptor. So it does affect your hormones, specifically your sex hormones, and not in a good way. So I tell people use lavender sparingly, right? It's not an everyday thing, and be careful because we don't want to add endocrine issues because, again, you're going to end up with a host of other issues now.
Got it.
I know a lot of people say, oh, well, lavender's, very calming and I spray it on my pillow. I'm like, please don't do that. Use it sparingly, once every couple of weeks or something. And if you're using it as an essential oil, you need to dilute it because, again, the dilution will affect the amount that's circulating in your blood afterwards.
That's fascinating. Fascinating.
So we've got to be careful because, and this is the thing, I can tell you, there's a host of herbs and other supplements that I work with my patients, but I have to be very careful, and I don't talk about these other ones without actually doing, like I said, a blood work, full analysis of the person, their medical history, their medications, because there are so many interactions, and they can cause other adverse effects, right? So unwittingly, people think that, if I take something that's natural, like an herb or, vitamins, minerals, that everything's going to be fine. No, understand that herbs especially are no different than a drug, like a medication. They can have serious consequences. So you need to understand a lot of this stuff. Don't self-diagnose. Work with someone who understands both pharma and natural. And then you'd have a more holistic approach because we can work with both and make sure there's synergy as opposed to opposition. And then if you're doing this, please, it's no different than taking pharmaceuticals. If you're taking something to deal with anxiety, that's fine, but you must make sure you deal with it at the mind level as well. So,
well, that's what I wanted to, let's switch. And so we've talked about the supplements, which is awesome. And now let's talk about the thinking, right? The thinking and the crappy beliefs and how we label kind of neutral events in the environment.
Well, that's exactly it. So it's important to understand that nothing in life has innate meaning. Okay. There's no event, stimulus that actually has innate meaning attached to it. You are the one who's assigning meaning to it. And your meaning is coming from whatever experiences you've had in the past.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's, an event happens. It's just a stimulus occurs. It has no meaning. You assign meaning based on what your experiences have been. You think this is what it is. So you need to change the meaning you assign to some events. You know,
have to change that meaning, right? You
yes,
have to uncover, you have to discover what the meaning is, because it's
exactly.
so happening so quickly, it's so unconscious, you don't really have an awareness, but you have to discover what the meaning is.
Yes,
You have to see it, like words on a billboard, right?
Exactly.
Really have to see it.
Well, and that's the thing, right? And even language has its own limitations. And when I think, so the good way to explain that nothing has meaning, you've got a bunch of letters that have sounds put strung together and make a word. That still doesn't have meaning unless you understand that language. It's just sounds.
Yeah.
Right? That is no different than general meaning. There's nothing in this world that has innate meaning, and nothing on this planet is good or bad always.
I love that. I love that.
Even things like, you know, and this is a hot topic, you know, like rape and all of that stuff. To a lot of us, yes, it has a negative meaning, a negative connotation. But in other cultures and certain tribes, it's a normal part of their life that they do not see as negative.
I mean, in our pre-chat, we were talking about death, right? We were talking about loss, grief, death. And that's exactly, I mean, that's a wonderful example of the meaning, the making meaning of these events in life, right? Exactly. You were sharing that death is the most natural thing. That here in our culture, we just attach so much to death.
Death is the most normal part of life. Okay. It's the one thing that is absolutely inevitable. Everything else can change and does change, because the only constant in life is change and death. That is it. And people of different cultures assign death meaning in different ways, right? With some cultures, and that's part of what I believe, it's a celebration of the life they had. Whereas, you know, a lot of the Western cultures, it's more of mourning because of loss. But understand that, yes, that's okay, because you're mourning, you know, the loss you feel, because you are not going to have these interactions with that person again. But from that standpoint, it is also selfish, because you're thinking of yourself, not the other person. And this is also, you know, it triggers another issue, which I've seen a lot lately. And I have to say, I just completely disagree with the idea that suicide is selfish. Okay? That is extremely shallow-minded to even say. If somebody actually takes their own life, can you imagine how much pain and suffering they must have been feeling to do what they did? It has nothing to do with those around them. You all have to deal with your own issues and understand that someone taking their own life means that they were in so much turmoil that this was their only option that they believed they had.
Yes.
So if anything, you should send compassion.
Yeah.
Not say it's selfish. No, you're being selfish for thinking that their life is important to you. Yes, their life may be important for you, but it's still their life. They're entitled to do what they want as they want. So death is not something to be, you know, afraid of, and it's certainly not something to try to, you know, suppress. Understand it's a normal, completely normal part of life, and it's focus on all the beautiful memories that you did have together, and wish them well in their next existence, whatever that beliefs are around that. It's fine, but understand that it is the most normal part of life. And it's okay for you to be sad because, like I said, you're mourning the loss that they're not going to be in your life. You're not going to have more of these amazing experiences, whatever the case may be. And that's okay. It's no different than having a divorce or losing a job, right? But it's normal and healthy and should not be negated. And it shouldn't be feared. It's the only constant.
A lot of death anxiety. I see a lot of people with a lot of death anxiety, right? Kind of going back to the anxiety, a lot of fear again, because it's the stories we're telling, right? It's the thinking, it's the stories, it's the meaning we've attached.
You know, and the research actually indicates, especially when it comes to, you know, death, when it comes to those who hold religious beliefs, primarily, you know, the monotheistic beliefs where there's a heaven and a hell, for instance. And the reason a lot of these people fear death, because that's what it is. You're taught to fear death, because if you're not a good person, whatever that means, right, you're going to go to hell and burn for eternity and suffer. This is, I mean, honestly, you're literally creating a state of trauma.
Terror.
Yeah, you induced a state of trauma that's not based in any evidence whatsoever.
Terrifying.
In fact, even if you look at things like, NDEs, right, the near-death experiences, every single one of them comes out feeling amazing afterwards, saying how wonderful it was. Not one has ever actually said, oh, it was the worst experience. I was burning, there was demons and whatever. None. It's a beautiful light. Everything's happy and peaceful. I would much prefer to believe that than believe that there's some eternal God or whatever that's going to torture you for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Right. So
another example of a story we can shift, right? Another example.
Well,
how do we shift the story? How do we shift the meaning?
Exactly it. Shift the story by learning about things that are not already in your wheelhouse. Right. So
tell me more about that.
So, for instance, if you do in fact believe that there's a heaven and a hell because of the three primary religions that believe in that, then study other religions that are not one of these three. What do they believe?
Okay.
And how do they go about that? So I would say think about, look at Buddhism, look at Taoism, look at Hinduism, and learn their cycles. What do they believe?
Yeah.
And
so that's a great.
Dig into.
I mean, and you can do that with anything, right? You can do that with anything. I mean, just take out religion and put
substitute it with absolutely anything.
Or relationships, or love, or career, or right.
You have to, and this is almost like doing a risk assessment, right? Because this is what you have to do when you have these automatic, negative thoughts that always enter your head. The first step is honestly be cognizant you have that happening in the moment, right? Because if you don't even notice it happening, you're not going to be able to change it.
That is the key, right? And people really struggle. Again, I work a lot with anxiety, and because of the anxiety, they really struggle with self-awareness. They really struggle with seeing the thoughts, right?
Yes. And that's self-awareness is the key. Yes. Yeah. That's metacognition.
How do you help people become a little more self-aware? And again, it's a continuum, right?
Absolutely.
If they get at 0, how do they get to 5% self-awareness and then grow the muscle from there?
Start with simple things like getting out of the city and getting into nature where everything is quiet. All that's around you is trees and plants. No humans, nothing. Animals are fine. Water is fine, even better. And just start walking and looking around. The sounds of nature and just being in nature has been clinically proven to reduce anxiety, to reduce cortisol, to really reduce the stress effect. That hypothalamic pituitary axis that's always on and activated when we're in a stress cycle, which is what anxiety is, it's reduced, it's lowered.
Yeah.
That's a good way to just start calibrating and starting to realize, okay, what does this feel like that I'm calm? Because a lot of people end up feeling anxiety so much over a course of years that they actually think this is the new normal for them. This does become the new normal for them. And so they don't actually know anything different.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's, it's sad. It's sad, but
it's heartbreaking.
You understand this. So you need to start teaching yourself, what does it actually feel like to be calm? And initially for people who are very anxious, that feeling of calm is going to be so disconcerting, so uncomfortable. It's what I think the saying is, I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. Because I'm like at peace and I've been anxious all my life because everything's going wrong. Something's going to happen. Right?
Yeah, that's right.
And so that's when you start to realize how far you've deviated off normal to start with.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And it's so true. It's so true. When I help people to start to kind of breath and do some breath work and regulate their breath, it literally feels uncomfortable for them.
Yes. Yes.
They get a lot of dizziness. There's a lot of tightness in the chest because the ligaments and tendons haven't been used for so time. We have to start very slowly, very, very slowly.
And that's what it is. Start slow. Breath work is a form of meditation. They're no different. Meditations and breath work are basically the same thing. So when people say, I don't meditate, but I do breath work, I'm like, so you're meditating.
Yeah.
So, they are the same thing. They're both from, the oldest culture in the world, which really came from, it was a Sanskrit. It actually came from Hinduism to start with, meditations and breath work. And there are things that everybody needs to learn how to do. But if you're in the moment anxious, and you notice that your body's tensing up, you're sweating, you've got cramps, you can't concentrate, you're getting dizzy, all of this stuff. Okay. Or you just, then first thing, just bring yourself to the present. Okay. And one of the easiest methods is the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method, right? It's a grounding approach. And really what it is look around you and five things, label 5 things you can see around you. And then label 4 things that you can touch and go touch, feel them. How do they feel? How are they different? What's the material like? Describe it to yourself. 3 things you can hear. What 3 different sounds can you hear? It attunes your brain, right? And then you go 2 smells. What 2 smells can I smell? Then lastly is what taste is in my mouth? One thing. What does my mouth taste like right now? That already tells your brain it's focusing now on here and now, very much so. It's literally attuning it to the present because it has no choice. You're trying to find these things.
Yeah.
Now we're more
Love
present.
That.
So start there if you're in that moment of that.
Yeah, if you're in. Yeah.
And
so we've got, go ahead. Sorry.
No, and then the other things are breath work. After that, it is important to start to recalibrate your mind and your body. And the one thing that can simultaneously do that is breath work. Right? So the breath work we want to be using for anxiety specifically is going to be things that engage the parasympathetic nervous system. So I must stress, not all breath work is created equal. Some breath work will actually create a more hyper excited state, engage the sympathetic nervous system, and make you much worse, throwing you into panic attacks and leading you into hospitals. So they're not all created equal.
All right. Well, share. What do we need to be doing? What do we need to be doing? Yeah.
Proven clinical breath works that engage the parasympathetic nervous system by directly activating your vagal system, your vagal nerve, is actually a hum. Just hum.
Hum?
Yes. Yes, exactly. Hum.
Okay.
So one of the things to make it very easy to start with is find an upbeat, positive lyrics song that you like and start humming that to yourself. Okay? And start there. That's easy to do. Another one then would be, the diaphragmatic breathing. Diaphragmatic breathing is very powerful because it does, in fact, increase nitric oxide. And nitric oxide creates something we call vasodilation, which literally means it allows the arteries and the veins, the blood vessels, essentially, to open up more, to allow more blood to flow, carrying more oxygen and nutrients. When you're in anxiety, you're in vasoconstriction. Everything's kind of shut down. You're in sympathetic mode. And that in itself will create more anxiety, right? So creating the opposite effect. So all you've got to do is really, put your hand, one on your chest, one on your belly button. The idea is try not to move your chest too much, because when you breathe from your chest, that's thoracic breathing. That's shallow breathing. That actually can engage sympathetic nervous activity. It's what you do when you're already stressed out, right? So we don't want here to be moving so much. We want your abdomen to be moving. You want to inhale and expand your abdomen and count for as long as you can. Inhale for, let's say, count of 6. And then Exhale gently for another count of 6 and contract your abdomen back in. And keep in that motion gently. And when you get good at that, you can start adding a feeling of, joy or peace or love or gratitude. One of the easiest ways to incite that within a person is to think about one of your pets. If you have pets, if you're very close to your kids, that's another way, or your spouse. You can put an image in your mind of them, and it immediately kind of fills you with that warmth. And think about them as you're doing that. That further pushes that parasympathetic engagement.
That's powerful.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is very important because it's also something when I deal with, patients that I see here, I deal with them, if they're physically with me, I'm going to hook them up to, an EKG and an EEG, because I'm actually going to monitor their brain and I'm going to monitor their heart, specifically looking at the engagement of the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. So in that particular breathing and then finding, that wonderful feeling to go with it, your heart rate variability shifts and it synchronizes. And now you're in a smooth, coherent pattern, both in your brain and in your heart. So physiologically speaking, you're reducing that stress response, that anxiety, which is good because over time, there are no people who actually have long-term anxiety or any mental health issues that don't end up with some physiological diseases. The biggest one being autoimmune diseases and inflammatory diseases. Because again, as soon as that HPA axis is open, cortisol is running through your body, right? Epinephrine, adrenaline, these are all excitatory. These are all sympathetic. These are meant to be your fight or flight mode. You see, there's a bear chasing you. What am I going to do? We need that in that situation. In everyday life, we don't. We really don't.
Yes,
but we activate that system all the time by our thoughts alone. Our thoughts are that powerful that your thinking alone will change your physiology, will change the hormones, will change in your transmitters, the peptides, the ligands. It literally changes whether your blood vessels and arteries are open or closed, where the blood's even going changes. In your brain,
so amazing.
The first thing that goes is your prefrontal cortex, which is, your control system, the CEO of your brain. It's your personality. It's your ability to have proper judgment, to plan, coordinate, all shuts down. And the blood moves back now into the limbic system, into the brainstem. You become hyper aroused. Your amygdala is overactive. And the brainstem is, again, controlling the rest of you, is now, we're in sympathetic mode. All right. So no blood's going to your digestive system. No blood's really going to your extremities. You're breathing too fast, shallow breathing, thoracic breathing, right? Not diaphragmatic. And again, it makes sense. But in that state, you also excrete a lot of inflammatory markers. You're right. Your cytokines are through the roof. And the reason is because from an evolutionary perspective, it makes complete sense. If you're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger and you get attacked, these inflammatory markers are going to help you keep that place clean and under control until you get to safety. But if now, through your thoughts alone, of, oh my gosh, I have a deadline tomorrow, or I have to meet my boss and he really hates me, and oh my God, how am I going to pay my bills? Oh my God. And now your thoughts alone are now creating this. So all these inflammatory markers are up. What do you think is going to happen with time? These inflammatory markers degrade your system. They degrade cells. Cortisol and adrenaline are not meant to be long-term because in a petri dish, if you have cells, you put either one of those with them, you leave them for a few days, they're fine because, again, they're meant to help you get that extra energy up because you're going to fight that bear or run. But if it's all because you're thinking about bills, your boss, or whatever, okay, so now where are these hormones and your transmitters? Where are they going to go? What are they going to do? Now, they're just floating around in your circulatory system. And attaching to every receptor on every single cell in your body. Now you've got aches and pains. Over time, you also have adrenal fatigue. Your cortex and adrenal medulla no longer secreting what they're supposed to be secreting. So now we don't even have it. adrenaline anymore. You're lethargic. You've got fatigue. You've got all kinds of autoimmune diseases, arthritis, right? Lupus, the biggest one being fibromyalgia. Fibromyalgia, we know now, is a mind issue, not so much a body issue. Yes, it's showing up in your body, but it's showing up now.
Yeah.
Over the course of how many years have you been so anxious?
Yeah.
So people need to understand that the mind is exceptionally powerful. On its own, it changes your body.
Yeah.
We have to be mindful of what we think, what we're telling ourselves about us and about the world. If you believe everybody's evil, you're actually going to find evil in everybody, because the brain also, through the RAS system, does in fact filter out information from sight. Not just from sight, primarily from sight because of the occipital lobe, but from all your senses. So you essentially be seeing only what you believe.
Yeah, confirmation bias, right?
That's what it is. And confirmation bias, yes, this is a psychological term, is confirmation bias. But from a neuroscience point of view, because it's physiology, we actually know how this works. It's a real thing in the body. Your RAS is literally filtering out anything, any information, any stimuli that does not align to what you already believe.
That's right. This is why this is so powerful, right? That it really, these conversations, right? The mental health piece, but the awareness of the thinking, the stories we are bringing in is just so crucial, so crucial.
And the thing is like most people have an abundance of internal dialogue, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right? And so, I always tell people there's a trio effect in your head. You've got whatever crap you're saying to yourself.
Yeah.
And the other one is listening to that.
Yeah.
Right? So who's the one listening? Okay. And more importantly, if you step back and listen and just watch, don't get involved, you'll find that there's a third one watching the dialogue of the two.
Yes. Yes.
The third one is what you need to pay attention to, because it tells the other two, hey, let's do a risk analysis here. This doesn't, let's look at it more objectively rather than through a subjective lens.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
what's the evidence?
Yes. And that's exactly it. What is the evidence? So what you can do is, if you're, more driven logically or analytical, like I am, and it's what I used to do, I would, as soon as I ground myself and breathe and I'm back to normal, I'd start writing down everything that I was thinking, what I believe. It starts with what I'm thinking. Actually start with what you were feeling, the emotion. I was feeling, nervous, irritable, afraid, because, and write the because I was thinking about, I don't have enough money in my bank to pay this bill. How am I going to do that? And then dig deeper and go, what do I believe about money, about making money? What do I believe about my ability to go get a better job, for instance? Right? What do I believe? So you need to look at your behaviors, your emotions, and go and look at your thinking, because they're directing those two.
That's right.
And dig deeper to look at the belief that led you to think that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And after you have it on paper, you can actually go, okay, what is the likelihood? Because literally you're creating a risk analysis now. What's the likelihood of this thought coming to fruition?
Yeah. Yeah.
And what's the evidence that support it? Is there evidence?
Yeah. And I might add another piece there. Once you've done all that, and you're looking at the evidence and you're really increasing the self-awareness, I might add, what is the need, right? What is the need, right? What need is this pushing against?
What are you trying to? Yeah, there's always a desire behind it, right?
Yeah. So what some kind of need, belonging or safety, or I'm feeling scared because I don't have enough money and I'm terrified, blah, 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 right? So what is the core need here as well?
Exactly. And these core needs, they're really motives, right? They're going to come from your belief system.
Yeah.
And that's why it's really important to understand, because a lot of us are blessed with so many beliefs from our childhood that don't necessarily align with who we are today, but they're still present and playing a part behind the scenes.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And so,
that's right.
You need to write things down and find evidence that supports what you believe and evidence that actually completely contradicts it.
Yeah.
Because that's how you look at things objectively. Your brain is not objective. Nobody's brain is objective because it's filtering things based on your beliefs.
Got it.
So you need to evaluate information like you would in a business. Make a risk assessment.
I love that. That.
And work, if you get to a point where you're kind of stuck, it is wise, especially if you've been feeling that way for a long period of time, to sit with someone who is trained and understands all these effects and how the mind and body work together and helps you, build better belief systems.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, because when you've been stuck in it for so long, it's very difficult to begin to see, right? Kind of see the wood from the trees kind of thing. So that's why a helper or a guide or a therapist or somebody like you can be really helpful in helping kind of put the spotlight on some of these beliefs and things that you just can't see for yourself, right? That's the power, honestly, the power of therapy, right? The power of having that person.
Agree. And definitely, I would say definitely do some yoga, tai chi, qigong. These are all proven to kind of reduce anxiety and remove depression. Weight training is also going to be very important because, again, when you're engaging the stress response, that sympathetic nervous system, which is engaged in any negative emotion. I have to stress that all negative emotions, by definition, are stress. Okay, yes, we have what we call eustress as well, which is more positive stress, which is what weight training would fall under. But it's a different stress. It's acute and positive. The biochemicals released with that are actually helpful for our body and our minds. But weight training also is important for people who are in, mental health crises, because when you have that sympathetic engagement, one of the normal responses is an elevated glucose response, because we need extra energy in the body now. So, which is why it leads to diabetes over time, because if your mental health is long-term this way, you will end up with some form of metabolic syndrome. And so weight training uses that glucose. It takes it in. It forces the muscles to actually open up and take it in.
Got it.
So weight training is important, not running. Running will not do the same level, in fact, it can cause other long-term issues. So definitely weight training, because you actually want to increase your muscle size so that they can take on more of that glucose that you keep presenting to your body. And because you have also high, norepinephrine, adrenaline in your body, it's also utilizing that as well.
Got it.
Whereas running can actually create more of that.
So much great information. Thank you.
There's so much, right? People just need to understand that there is a lot of help. We do understand where mental health issues come from. But not all therapy is created equal either, right? If you're seeing, there are so many forms of therapy, so many forms of psychologists and neuroscientists and psychiatrists. I would urge people to work with people who are trained in both the pharmaceutical side and the natural side, and people who maybe, depending on where you are in that spectrum of anxiety, and especially if you are on medications and have a list of health issues already, health diseases, work with a biofunctional, psychiatrist, because they are MDs, or people who have, several PhDs or something, working in biochemistry and, pharmacology, things like that. Because just because, again, like I said, just because something's natural does not mean it doesn't have adverse effects. And if you have pre-existing health conditions, these do interact. So we've got to be careful. And if somebody's going to tell you, well, because I've heard this too, where, well, just be positive, just stay positive. I just, sometimes I'm not going to lie. And I just shake my head and I'm like, you cannot force positivity. Okay.
Right.
When we say, I'm a positive person, it means I accept things as they are. So I accept that there are negatives. I see them. I understand what caused them. And I'm going to find the solutions to them to make it positive. It's not negating the negativity, because if you negate negativity, if you negate what is actually happening, that's called suppression.
Yeah.
Right. And
that's not feeling the feelings, right?
No, you need to feel the feelings, and you need to know where they're coming from to find the appropriate solution. Because if you don't feel the feeling and understand what's happening and what's causing it, how are you possibly going to actually find an appropriate solution to fix this? You won't.
Right.
And you're going to end up in this cycle, and the cycle is going to get much worse. So there's no such thing as, positive psychology. That movement is entirely rubbish. Entirely rubbish. And I will say that hands down. Complete rubbish to say positive psychology is a thing. No. You want to be positive, but being positive does not mean I negate negativity. It doesn't mean I push something that's unpleasant aside. It doesn't mean that I'm just going to pretend it doesn't exist. Because that's what they're saying is, well, just, what do they say? Fake it till you make it? To a certain point, that's going to work. And eventually it gets you in trouble. Because if you don't understand the cause, the real cause, you can't fix it.
Yeah. We should probably do a whole nother show on that, because that's a massive topic, right? Talking about toxic positivity, really. There's so much of that around, of floating around in our world, and so many cultural messages about fake it till you make it, and, just think positively and blah, blah, blah. But you're right. We're bypassing, right, all the emotions and the tide underneath that. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's normal to have negative emotions, because they are basically emotions. All emotions are really, in the most simplest of definitions, because people don't understand, they're biochemicals. Emotions are biochemicals you're secreting by your thinking. They are there to let you physically know how you feel about what you're thinking.
Back to the thinking. We're back to the thinking.
Back to the thinking. So it's like, okay, if I'm thinking this way, what do I believe? I don't like how I feel like it. So maybe we should change that.
Yeah. Right? And then you go out, you get grounded, you really kind of check in, you do the thought analysis, right?
Yes.
You take some breath, you do the exercise that you talked about, and
absolutely
reset. Try and reset a little bit. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And it takes time. That's the other thing too.
It does.
This is real work.
It's real work.
Time. Because
I think that's another thing that gets lost.
Well, because a lot of people want quick fixes, right? It's like, I can just pop this medication and I don't have to deal with anything. I don't have to work on anything. That's really what the culture is now. Is, I'll just take this medication. I don't have to deal with my issues. And then you come see me 2 years later, because now you have adverse effects from the medication you're on, coupled with all these extra issues. Now it's like, okay, we have to face the actual issues. There's no way around it. Get comfortable being uncomfortable for a little while.
Right.
And know you're going to be okay.
Yes, right. We've just come full circle. Fantastic. You've been amazing today. I just appreciate you, and just your expertise and your knowledge and your compassion is just beautiful. So thank you. Well, if listeners want to reach out, where can they find you?
Honestly, my website is elsawagdy.com. So definitely do that. My number is there. My email is there. Happy to help anybody who needs help. I am not for the faint of heart, right? So I am not for someone who wants to be coddled and told that, they're there. You're going to be okay. Yes, you are going to be okay. I can guarantee it. But I'm also going to tell you flat out, I'll call you out on all the BS that comes up. And I'm going to very much tell you how to get through it. But if you do not deliberately do the work, You cannot play victim anymore because you're the one accountable for your own health and your own life. No one else is responsible for you or your triggers.
Yeah. Beautifully said. So I will put all those links in the show notes. And again, thank you so much for today.
It's been such a pleasure.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks so much for listening. I truly appreciate you and your time. I love to hear from listeners, so connect with me at katechampionauthor.com. Remember to grab your free hiking guide, and please take a quick moment to rate, review, and subscribe to the show. Thanks so much. Take care. Until next time. Hey, me again. Just a reminder, this podcast should not be considered professional advice. It's also not a substitute for mental, physical, or any other healthcare-related treatment. For any questions about your condition and or concerns, please contact a fully licensed healthcare professional. Thank you.